Hi, my name's Anita Major and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm here to speak to you about the creation of the anatomically correct model of the clitoris and vulva clitorate. I'd certainly like to acknowledge that I am talking to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people and the land of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and really acknowledge that the connection to country over the past 60,000 years. Today is going to be a really brief overview on why I've created Cliterate, the process of that creation and the product design, and the associated resources and how we use that clinical. So how has it changed what we do in a clinical for practice based on the research? I work for a company called Thrive Rehab. We have about 8 occupational therapists that work with a large focus on working with folk around sexuality and disability education. And that's sort of been my focus for the last 25 years as a therapist, always including sexuality and education. But why clitoris? Basically, why have we created it and how have we created it to overcome the awkward? For many years, I used these models. So as you can see here on the left-hand side, there's a model of the pelvis, which is a pretty typical medical model. I finished OT in 1998, which is the same year as Dr. Helen O'Connell had discovered really the full extent of the clitoris. But this model on the left is really very hard for the folk that I work with to understand. So we got very excited when we got the plush model of the vulva. So you can see that here in the middle, and the other exertion over there is actually the clitoris. And for what it was really one of the first ways of explaining vulvar anatomy and clitoral anatomy. But as you can see, it's not quite anatomically correct. And a lot of the folk that I worked with, which were neurodiverse, were like, what the hell is that? Is this a pillow that I could lean up against? And certainly, particularly a couple that one of the people was visually impaired and the other person had cerebral palsy. When I was doing sex ed for that couple, I was really lamenting the fact that we didn't have a model that I could help explain anatomy and processes of normal sexual arousal, or normal in inverted capitals. So I'd been really lucky and I met the amazing Dr. Judith Glover from RMIT. And over coffee one day, I was lamenting over the fact that there wasn't a model of that was actually depicted the clitoris and the vulva and the interactions that I could use in my clinical practice. And Dr. Glover went, we can do that. And it started us up on a journey, which then encompasses both Charlie Richardson, who's an industrial designer, and then Cara Jordan Miller. And this is a little bit of a snapshot of where we started and where where we're currently landing. And there's certainly lots of things that we can add into here that I'll talk about today. But really, we started in 2018 when I'm going, there's no model really around. But I did speak to a journalist, and a journalist, Melissa Fyfe, had done an article on Helen O'Connell and had tracked down all these amazing journal articles that are actually quite hard to track down. And they were very kind and provided me with these journal articles. So what I did was I created a brief to RMIT to say I would like an anatomically correct version of the clitoris and the vulva, but there's nothing out there at the moment for me to show you other than this, the pelvis in the old-fashioned traditional pelvis model and this plush model. So I gave them the 5 articles of medical research and the 2 plush models and the traditional model, and a brief, which was basically I needed something that I could use for all of my folk with disabilities. And what they came up with was my first initial CAD concept. I still remember being really excited about. So Dr. Judith Glover and Cara and Charlie came up with this first model, which looks a little bit sad, really, but of taking directly from the medical research and translating it. I then took this information at being the client, and I took that to Dr. Helen O'Connell as the start of COVID, and we're just figuring out soon. But we took this, and they were very, very generous with their feedback of what we've got right, what we didn't have right. And then we took that feedback, incorporated it into the next part, which was looking at how else do we present it, and then we were looking at, well, how do we get this out into the world? In those, there was multiple design iterations, a lot which I wasn't really aware of, but this was certainly what was presented back as options of what sort of shape, how would you like to have this happen? And we landed on the spherical model because it looked really cool. And Dr. RMIT basically, and this is Charlie during COVID, printed this quite amazing 3D printed model, which has taken many, many hours to create in 3D printing. And then what we did was we created 12 of them. And then a team, including myself, took these out to health professionals, secondary school teachers, sex educators, pelvic floor physios, sexologists, urologists. We had a huge group of body forums, gynecologists, sexual health physicians. And we said, use these. Take them into your practice. Tell us what's good, what's not good, what would you like changed, how do you want these changed? So in this process, it was in that reusability is what we were getting a lot of feedback for. And we also got feedback again from Dr. Helen O'Connell, and this is just my workings of the notes taking from that. We did groups of forums, survey monkeys, face-to-face meetings, and this was all very much for my client-facing, both myself and another occupational therapist called Lucy McDonald, who is there. So Lucy did a lot of that sort of background work with me. Also would like to shout out that Fiona McRae. So Fiona McRae has lived experience of disability, and basically did a lot of work with the teachers and forums and gathering information about what we got right, what we don't have right. And then Jane got involved with us as a bit of an operations person to pull all this together. So we got the final product, and that was done by both Charlie and Cara, and their design products was then translated over to Pete from X Products, who has been a fabulous addition to the team on basically creating the product, how to make it into something that we could sell. So how do we do the manufacturing files, liaising with the industrial designers, or with the companies that are doing the injection molding and printing. And there was lots of back and forth for that process. And then we got, and certainly Cara and Charlie and Dr. Glover came back in at that process and said, yep, this is working, this is not. So there was lots of interactions, but Pete really pulled together, the product as it is now and has made it into a usable concept. So just revisiting the timeline is that we started in that 2018 period, and what we're up to now is sort of the 2022 period where the product has made its way to Pete. So concurrently to what Pete was doing in terms of when he was translating the CAD files is that I went looking to find out in that last 2 or 3 years, was there anyone else making models from around the world? And was there any updated research? And as a result, we formed and found the International Cliterate. The International Cliterate is a group of other model makers from around the world, but also medical professionals that are really interested in this area. And particularly shout outs to Professor Jenny Hayes, who is an absolute expert on vulva anatomy, and obviously Professor Helen O'Connell, who's Order of Australia from Australia. And there's other amazing medical professionals. So as we were working alongside, this is actually a model that was done in Geneva. This is not commercially available. It's fabulous. I wish I had it before we started, but it's a really accurate model, but it doesn't have the vulva as inclusive as well. And this is another great models being made in Canada. Again, these are vulva anatomies, so showing diversity, but in lots of different colours, and we certainly use these within our concept, but still not quite fitting what we needed. So we've got the model. We've then got on board Brad Welsh, who is from Bureau of Ideas, to help us organise educational resources. So what do we want people to know about? Brad designed the Cliterate logo and really designed all the look and feel of the packaging. Although, that was initially started by RMIT as well, this would look good. So we did a lot of work with refining. And Brad also built this website based on a lot of the education materials we had. So we know that not everyone can afford the Cliterate model, so we were trying to get, how do we get this information out there? This is a snapshot from the video. You press on the clitoris and this is what comes up. The same thing, you press on the vagina and it comes up with, this is the medical information. And we really talked about, this is a stylized version, and in that back and forth of research, health professionals were saying we need to show it as a stylized closed vagina, so it's not just ready to go. So if there was some other medical models out there which were super expensive and I could never get access to, the vaginas were often shown really large and open. So they're using this as an educational resources, looking at the different options. From there, we've got this great model, and we just don't want to stop. So this is actually further work that RMIT have done. So since 2003, since we launched at the World Sexual Health Conference, that we've done, this is a non-engorged, non-aroused clitoris, is in the purple, and then the glow in the dark one. So this is part of our Clit and Collect range. We did this because medical research basically says if you MRI a pelvis of someone who has a vulva, if the clitoris is engorged, it means it's filled with blood. So it means at MRI it will glow white. And if it's not engorged in blood, so it's not aroused, then it won't be glowing at all. So I had one of my kids' friends said, so the clitoris is like a mood ring. And I'm like, yeah, we could say that. So this really hands-on approach allows us to really talk about the different processes of arousal and engorgement, and it really also helps me talk a lot about that the processes are often reflexogenic. So that means that there's not, you may have unconsensual touch in the area of your vulva or your penis, and you'll get this automatic arousal process happening. Doesn't mean that you're consenting to it. In the future, what we are wanting to do is look at labia. So these are just design process in the protocol concept as well. So we're really wanting to look at the design of inserting in labia minoris, which we know from Professor Jenny Hayes are all different, and we don't see this in the general media. We don't, we have there's still laws in Australia that prevent us from seeing vulvas that are typical vulvas, and the typical vulvas are asymmetrical. They protrude, they have a role in sexual functioning. And I think we also, so this is, again, based on research, based on evidence, so Jenny Hayes' work, and really based on trying to educate. We know that without this information, people are asking, are my vulvas normal? And so we're really wanting to make this as a common teaching tool in both health and in education. There are some great we've launched in 2023. This is Lucy. There's a video another time you can watch if you like about how we use this in clinical practice within occupational therapy in multiple ways. We launched in Turkey in last year, and at the World Sexual Health Conference, and have definitely sold these models around the world. So from China to South Korea to Japan to Sri Lanka, South Africa, I think France, Geneva, Canada, UK. So certainly from around the world, multiple European countries we've sold the Cliterate model to. And it is one of those concepts of selling them to OTs, sex educators, gynecologists. So really with that concept of trying to teach in a way that people understand, an interactive way. So thanks very much. Please feel free to explore. We're really excited about the journey that we've been on for the last 5 years, and we're really excited about the journey of what we might be able to organise and get to later on. Thank you.